The Shroud, it was called. The transformation. When it came, the fortunate person's life ended and began anew. He would discard his old mundane existence and move to Elantris. Elantris, where he could live in bliss, rule in wisdom, and be worshipped for eternity. Eternity ended 10 years ago. Hello, my ghouls and goblins. Welcome back to By Book and Bone, or if you're new here, welcome. Pull up a chair and get comfortable. Well, I don't know about you, but I've had a long week. Albeit I did catch the plague, so it's not surprising that I'm a bit woolly today. I've made a bit of progress on my June read, so at least there's that. Well, enough belly aching. On to the video. Many of you have likely heard of Brandon Sanderson, an absolute monolith in the world of epic fantasy. But have you heard or read the novel that started it all? Elantris, Sanderson's debut novel, is an epic fantasy set in the shadow of a once great city. It seems to be the least known of Sanderson's work, and in a moment I hope to impress upon you why this is such a shame. Elantris was the capital of Erlon, gigantic, beautiful, literally radiant, filled with benevolent beings who used their powerful magical abilities for the benefit of all. Yet each of these demigods was once an ordinary person until touched by the mysterious transforming power of the Shroud. 10 years ago, without warning, the magic failed. Elantrians became wizened, leper-like, powerless creatures, and Elantris itself dark, filthy, and crumbling. Erlen's new capital, Kay, crouches in the shadow of Elantris. Princess Sarene of Teod arrives for a marriage of the state with Crown Prince Raiden, hoping, based on their correspondence, to also find love. She finds instead that Raiden has died, and she is considered his widow. Both Tade and Erlen are under serious threat as the last remaining holdouts against the imperial ambitions of the ruthless religious fanatics, or Fjordell. So Serene decides to use her new status to counter the machinations of Hrathen, a Fjordell high priest who has come to Kai to convert Erlen and claim it for his emperor and his god. But neither Serene nor Hrathen suspect the truth about Prince Raiden. Stricken by the same curse that once ruled Elantris, Raiden was secretly exiled by his father to the Dark City. His struggle to help the wretches trapped there begins a series of events that will bring hope to Erlen, and perhaps reveal the secret of Elantris itself. They tried boiling books, but that didn't work very well. I'm surprised they haven't tried boiling one another. Oh, it's been tried, Galadin said. Fortunately, something happens to us during the Shroud. Apparently the flesh of dead man doesn't taste too good. Kolo, in fact, it's so violently bitter that no one can keep it down. It's nice to see that cannibalism has been so logically ruled out as an option, Raiden said dryly. Our three main characters and their POVs are Serene, an extraordinarily tall princess, Raiden, the prince she's due to marry, well, except he looks a bit more like this, Hrathen, the zealous priest, who looks more like this but with more clothes on, and a multitude of other smaller characters. Serene is a great character to follow, but she suffers a bit from no flaws-itis and doesn't know she's beautiful ammonia. This is one of the ways in which you can see Sanderson's relative inexperience compared to his later work. Serene is forceful and is seen as flawed by many of the other characters, particularly her countrymen, which is why she chooses to leave and arranges her own marriage to ally her country with Erlen. Rodin himself would be a straight-up Gary Stew if it wasn't for the Shroud and the terrible affliction that hits him in the beginning of the story. He and the other Elantrians are the fallen gods of the abandoned city. While most have given in to the hunger, when they reach the city, Raiden wants a better life for his new people. Hrathen is one of the main antagonists, but it's not quite so simple. His leader has decided to invade Erlen and plans to genocide anyone who does not bow to their god. So Hrathen needs to convert the people of Erlen by any means necessary. I think he's like he's 3 months to convert everyone, particularly the king. And he believes in the righteousness of his religion, but he also wants to prevent slaughter. So he's like this pompous ass for most of the story, but at the same time, like, he's not evil. Like, it's very clear that he's not evil. He's just religious. There's a plethora of supporting characters, most of whom stand out and give their own angle to the story, but some of them blend together quite a bit, and I wonder if the book would have done better from having the character roster slimmed a tad. Elantris, the great city herself, is pretty much its own character. So much of the story depends on the character of the fallen city and how the like kind of the mood of the city and how it's because it fell and it became covered in this slime and everybody's starving, and it's like this dark shadow over the rest of the country. I don't want to explain too much, but I became obsessed with Elantris and the mystery behind it. The rest of the characters were kind of just for along for the ride, and I actually found myself getting annoyed sometimes when they were like doing their own thing and having their own like minor issues or whatever, and I was like, oh yeah, like whatever, can we get back to the city? You will find that hate can unify people more quickly and more fervently than devotion ever could. So I'm a big Sanderson fan. Years ago, a friend of mine recommended Mistborn to me when I was in that sort of stage of reading a book a month if I was lucky. I was in a sort of passion slump, and Mistborn reignited that obsessive reading I hadn't experienced since I was a teenager. Like, Sanderson isn't perfect, but the accessibility of his writing and the world building he does is second to none. So I couldn't recommend him enough. Especially, I am a dyslexic reader, so I find his books really great for if I'm having issues or if I'm just a bit tired. So I just don't have the energy to put into the physical aspect of reading. Still, sometimes I don't have the energy for the big epic fantasy series set in the Cosmere that he has. In this way, Elantris is perfect. It's an epic fantasy, but it's also a standalone. I've heard more is due to be added to make it a series, but as it stands, this is a one-off, and it reads that way. So it's completely satisfying in itself, just this book, if you don't want to put in the energy and like the time for like a massive sprawling fantasy series. The Redemption of Thawless by David Eddings is one of my favourites for the same reason. The story itself is several small mysteries standing on each other's shoulders, dressed in a trench coat, trying to pass as one big mystery rather than a traditional fantasy journey. No matter where you are in the book, there's something small you want to find out. Like, there's always this layers and layers of like different mysterious things. Like, everybody has their own, like every name character has their own thing going on, and you don't get to find out all of it. Like, there are like these people have their like rich lives that isn't on the page all the time, which I think, even though at this time Sanderson was a really new writer, that's still like kind of a great trick to have, where if you like, he didn't want to keep going on and on and on and on about all what the characters are doing, but you get the sense that they've this three-dimensional lives going on that you're not looking at right now. Elantris isn't a perfect book though. Like, you can sense Sanderson's inexperience throughout some of the sections. Like, I rolled my eyes at a few points with the weaker writing, but it's a book a veteran author can be proud of. Especially like a debut is really great. Like, it still stands up. It's not one of those things where you read it as your first Sanderson novel and then you can't go back to it because you've read his other amazing stuff. Like, I've read quite a bit of Sanderson's, and he's a brilliant, like, I really love his stuff, but I still went back and read Elantris later and loved it. There's so much of Sanderson's later books present in Elantris, but in their beta forms. If you've read some of the Stormlight Archive, you're going to see the Spren, Shaylin, the carapaces of the Parshendi, among other concepts. They're not exact copies or anything. It's more like there's this cohesion to Sanderson's world building which works out well, considering how all of his fantasy books are related to each other within the Cosmere. So it's like there's no exact copying or anything like that, but there's definitely, like, you can see he wrote Elantris as this big epic one-off, but that he had like these kind of smaller ideas that he wanted to flesh out, and then he's doing that in the Stormlight Archive. I can see some of these similarities annoying some readers, as Elantris is undoubtedly a simpler book than the Stormlight Archive series, but personally I almost prefer Elantris. While I'm absolutely left with questions about the world, the characters and their arcs are done, so you get to read the epic fantasy, but you don't have to like spend all your time at it, and once you've finished it, it's like, oh, okay, and you can, like if you spend like 3 days, you don't have to like run off and try buy another book. Like it's done, and that's I need more of that, to be honest, in this kind of when I'm so busy all the time. I've grown to really prefer series that are set in the same universe but follow different characters, barring maybe like one character that brings it all together. So I am kind of looking forward to seeing how Sanderson turns Elantris into a series. Like I do hope that he leaves these characters behind, and maybe they can be like in the background with new characters coming to the forefront. One cannot separate truth from actions. Physically inevitable or not, truth stands above all things. It is independent of who is the best army, who can deliver the longest sermons, or even who has the most priests. It can be pushed down, but it will always surface. Truth is the one thing you can never intimidate. Well, there we have it. I don't want to go too much into the story of Elantris. I'm afraid of delving into spoiler territory, and I feel like much of Elantris needs to be unspoiled because I want people to read it. Go do that. Now. Oh, I finished my wine. It's time for a refill, I feel. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give the video a like. If you have your own opinions on Sanderson and Elantris, please comment below. Are you excited about his recent announcement of writing an inhuman number of books during the pandemic? Let me know. Until we meet again.